morning. Good morning, y'all. Good morning and welcome to First Unitarian Universalist Church of Nashville. My name is Jay Tiefenbrunn and I'm very pleased to be your Director of Music Ministries. I'd like to invite you to join in singing this morning with our opening hymn. What is the opening hymn? Come Thou Font of Every Blessing. We're going to do this in 5/4, so if reading the music written in 3/2 is going to confuse you, you can use the words in the order of service, or you can rise in body or in spirit as you're so moved and join in singing number 126, Come Thou Font of Every Blessing. Please rise and join in the singing. Come Thou Font of Every Blessing, tune our hearts to sing Thy grace. Streams of mercy ever ceasing, call for songs of loudest praise. While the hope of life's perfection fills our hearts with grace and love, teach us ever to be faithful. May we still Thy goodness prove. Come Thou Font of every vision, lift our eyes to what may be. See the lion and the young lamb dwell together in Thy home. Hear the cries of warful silent, feel our love glow like the sun. When we all serve one another, then our heaven is begun. Come Thou Font of inspiration, turn our lives to higher ways. Lift our gloom and desperation, show the promise of this day. Help us bind ourselves in union, help our hands tell of our love. With Thine aid, O Font of justice, earth be fair as heaven above. Good morning. Our second song this morning is number 170, We Are a Gentle Angry People, or Singing for Our Lives. Number 170. Keep in mind that verse 5, we are using Holly Near's updated lyrics. We are all in this together. I'll line these lyrics out for you if you'd rather not be stuck in the book. Number 170. We are a gentle, angry people. We are a gentle, angry people. And we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, angry people. And we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people. And we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a justice-seeking people. And we are singing, singing for our lives. We are young and old together. We are young and old together. And we are singing, singing for our lives. We are young and old together, and we are singing, singing for our... We are a land of many colors. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a land of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are all in this together. We are all in this together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are all in this together, and we are singing, a gentle, loving people. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are a gentle, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. Our third song this morning is in the turquoise hymnal, Singing the Journey. We are building a new way. Number 1017, number 1017, we are building a new way, and you know what? I'm gonna line this out for you too. So sing along, shake along, kids, if you wanna grab a shaker, they're down there under the piano. Ready? We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, making stronger every day. We are building a new way. We're working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed our every need. 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 Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. 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 Without these we'll surely die. Peace and freedom is our cry. We're building a new way. We are sorry about that. Building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, making stronger every day. We are building a new way. Good morning. I'd like to take a moment to introduce our new collaborative pianist, Holling Smith-Bourne. Welcome. Please take a moment and greet your neighbors.
The words to our chalice lighting come from Ray Nossaman. We gather around this flame that symbolizes the truth we know and the truth we seek, the community we share and the community we aspire to, the learning that enables us and the mystery that encompasses. Here we speak the languages of memory and hope. Here we are welcomed, our journeys embraced and shared.
I'd like to invite you to join your hearts, minds, and spirit into this spirit of worship with these words by the Reverend Gordon McKinnon, who was in the last generation one of the great Universalist ministers. Hell is, in fact, a burning issue, for it is the issue of separation, whether we can, with safety and impunity, set up little islands in the human experience and therefore protect ourselves against any relationships with the mainland. And universalism says unequivocally, it cannot be done.
Do you? Once upon a time, there was a very, very curious little girl who liked to ask a lot of questions. Some people even said she asked too many questions. Do you have any more questions?
Oh, so do you like that necklace? Do you? Did you get up? Did you have to set your alarm this morning? Did you drive here? Did you go to work this week?
One day, this very curious little girl met this amazing new student at school who was really, really fun and amazing, and she really wanted to get to know her.
Hi, what you doing?
Nothing.
Well, how was your day?
Fine.
Well, are you new here?
I guess.
Well, so do you live nearby?
No.
Do you go to school?
Duh.
So, did you want to play here in the playground?
No. So her line of questioning got more and more awkward for both of them. Luckily, the neighborhood fairy came by and was distributing her special kind of magic.
You look frustrated. Can I help you?
Well, there was this kid that looked like they'd be fun, but they didn't want to talk to me. I even asked questions, and they just didn't want to talk to me. And I don't know if I'm doing something wrong. I thought I was a good talker.
Well, what kind of, maybe you were asking yes and no questions instead of open questions that invite curiosity. I'm going to bestow upon you the magic of open questions.
I'll try again.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
What have you been doing today?
Oh, I went on the playground, and I went down the slide, and I went again, and I went again, and I went again, and then I went on the tower, and I had a really good time.
Wow, I'm kind of scared of that slide, but I really love the swings. What do you like best?
I like the tower. I like to climb the tower, and when I go to the top of the tower, I feel like I can fly!
Well, if you could fly anywhere for real, where would you go?
I think I'd go to an island and dig for a treasure or something.
Well, when you got to the island and you could have any superpower, even not just flying, but any superpower, what would you pick?
I don't know. What would you pick? So, as you can see, the two of them, even though they had just met, they quickly found a connection which lasted a long, long time. So what was your favorite part of the story?
May it be so. And now we're going to sing the children to their activities, and we're gathering at the door right over there, and the song is on the inside back cover of your gray hymnal.
Good morning. My name is Chris Martin, and I'm a member of this congregation, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here in the sanctuary and those joining us online to worship this morning. In order to reach a wider community than those able to be physically present on Sunday morning, portions of this service are live streamed and available on YouTube and on our website at thefun.org. Before I continue, let me remind you to silence your cell phones. As Unitarian Universalists, our spiritual paths vary, but in this congregation, we have made a covenant together. We affirm our interdependence, celebrate our differences, and work for justice. We deepen our relationships as we create a compassionate, welcoming community, nurture spiritual growth, and act on our values in the broader world. I want to extend a special welcome to visitors worshiping with us this morning. We ask you to wear the paper name tags because it helps us to get to know you better. If you are seeking a spiritual home, we hope that you may find it here. Whether you are new to Unitarian Universalism or visiting from another UU congregation, we invite you to stop by the welcome table after the service to have questions answered. People become members of this congregation by signing the membership book and supporting the church with their time and finances. If you are considering joining the church, please talk to our assistant minister, Denise Gouch. Following the service, we hope everyone will enjoy coffee and fellowship in the social area, where you will also find information about current opportunities for engagement and reflection. There are a number of announcements in the weekly bulletin, which I hope you will take home and read. And here are a few more. Dinners for 9 signups in the social hall begin today. Dinners for 9 groups help fun community members get to know each other over monthly dinners. Sign up to join one of this year's dinner groups through the fun website or at the sign-up table in the social hall on Sunday mornings today and on August 26th or September 2nd or 9th. See the weekly bulletin and email for more information. Habitat Fall Unity Build signups begin today. Our Habitat Build will be Monday and Tuesday, October 22nd and 23rd. We will sign up builders and those who can bring food starting today at the social justice table. Also, we have some special guests present today, which I'm going to turn over the floor for just a moment.
And we have our family here today that we're going to build a house for. And so I want Heaven, Honey, and Hazel to stand up. Tekla George. And so... And I wanted to make a correction that our Habitat build is going to be on a Saturday and a Sunday. I guess I did a typo there when I wrote that up. But we also have Carol, what's your Strawn, I'm sorry, I just got the first name. And she's from Habitat, and we're all going to be at the social justice table between services and after the second service to answer your questions about the build and about the Habitat process in general. And you can meet the family and sign up, because we have about 22 slots available that we want to fill. Thank you.
And just one final announcement, please be sure to show up for NOAA. There will be a press conference demonstration at Public Square Tuesday, August 21st at 4 p.m. in response to police shootings. NOAA is demanding that Mayor Briley fire Chief Anderson and endorse a referendum for the Community Oversight Board. You can read the resolution at thefund.org.
Good morning. My name is Becky Fowler, and I'm a member of this congregation. And I would like to know how many people here have heard of nonviolent communication? Okay, that's a lot. How many of you think you could define it in a succinct sentence? Wow. Okay, so I'm going to attempt this. The pillars of nonviolence of active nonviolence are love, truth, and courage. So nonviolent communication is the practice of loving, truthful, courageous communication. And it places human connection as the highest goal of communicating. And I will affirm that learning this requires sustained, courageous practice. Now, learning the language of nonviolence can feel a little clunky at first. From the time we're small, we have all absorbed and integrated language patterns that blame and judge. So in MVC, we practice saying things like, instead of saying Tom is a poor soccer player, I could say Tom has not scored a goal in 20 games. The first is not objectively true, and it judges Tom as being kind of poor. The second is accurate. What if Tom's the goalie and he's actually a great soccer player? There are a lot of unintentional ramifications of the ways that we learn to interact with each other. Authenticity is about being true to your word. Nonviolent communication practice is about making your word true to you. So in NVC, we always practice these grammar and language patterns because it's vital for integrating integrating learning and developing strong neural pathways. But this year, we are also going to actively practice cultivating NVC consciousness. See, our brain isn't just some blob in our head that sends down orders to our body. Our brain is our entire nervous system. It runs throughout our bodies, and it's constantly taking in millions of pieces of information and generating feedback. If our pulse increases, and our breath changes, and our neck muscles become rigid, it influences these tapes that play in our brains, these thoughts that we think. We might use words like agitated, or irritated, or tense to describe what's going on physically and mentally, but this is all just feedback. It's our body giving messages to us to be present and pay attention, and we use our brains to decide what these messages mean. A core principle of nonviolent communication is that I am responsible for everything that I think and feel. That's right, it's my body and my nervous system generating this response, and I get to decide how to interpret that information. So if I had to say to someone, you know, what you said right now was really hurtful to me, then I'm actually blaming the other person for my response. We're all just this bundle of defense mechanisms. If your body is stabbed, all the muscles tense up and get hard so you won't get stabbed again, and it's the same with words. If I show up and I'm blaming, all of the other person's muscles are going to tense up. So if we can learn to show up in a very loving and compassionate and vulnerable way, and this is most important with people who have harmed or hurt us in some way, and we can own our own emotional experiences, this can open up a lot of new doors. So imagine for a minute that if instead of coming to someone and saying, you know, I'd like to revisit this, you know, I was very hurt when you said that, what if I can say something like, I'm sorry for making you responsible for my pain. If we can start a conversation from a vulnerable place and take responsibility for our own emotional experiences, it leaves room for the other person to show up in a similar manner. In a way, this kind of communication is about forgiveness in the moment. Forgiveness doesn't mean condoning someone's behavior. Forgiveness means releasing our right to feel resentment. The Buddhist nun Pema Chodron explains bodhicitta by saying that citta means heart, mind, or attitude. Bodhi means awake, enlightened, or completely open. Those who train wholeheartedly in awakening bodhicitta are called bodhisattva warriors. Not warriors who kill and harm, but warriors of non-aggression who hear the cries of the world. Learning to use language that doesn't blame anybody is fundamental to my bodhisattva training. I'm going to read just a short little bit from her book, where she says, Bodhisattva are men and women who are willing to train in the middle of fire. Training in the middle of the fire can mean that warrior bodhisattvas enter challenging situations in order to alleviate suffering. It also refers to their willingness to cut through personal reactivity and self-deception, to their dedication to uncovering the basic, undistorted energy of bodhicitta. So if this appeals to you, this is an invitation to join us for some sustained, courageous MVC practice this fall. You can sign up in the social area afterwards. But it's also a challenge. If you're willing to learn to train in the middle of the fire, come and experience it. Thanks.
I invite you now to take a deep breath, settle yourselves in your seats, bring yourself to an awareness of having arrived here in this gathered community this morning. And as you know yourself to be here and to be held in this community, you may want to think over the last week, and there may be things that brought you great joy, or things that concern you greatly, or sorrows that you'd wish to mark here in this community. And if you would like to come forward and place a stone in the bowl, our lay minister this morning, Hal Potts, will help you with that. If you would like to have your joy or your sorrow spoken aloud to the congregation, you'll find yellow slips of paper in the pew in front of you. If you write down what you'd like us to say, we will bring that verbally to the congregation as well.
Bob Riddle played.
We hold these joys, these sorrows, and many more that are unspoken and lie still in our hearts. Let us, doing that, come together in a spirit of prayer. Spirit of life and love, help us to know that we can never build little islands to protect ourselves against the relationships that are inherent in our being in this world. As we're blown about by the big, big world in which we feel so small, help us to find the webs that connect us, that hold us, the love, the strength that bears us up no matter what. May we know ourselves held here in this gathered community and in the wider webs which enfold us and hold us no matter where we go. May it be so. Amen. Blessed be. Every week, we take up an offering to support the work of this church, and each month we choose an organization to support by sharing a portion of our offering. Our recipient this month for Share the Plate is actually an internal organization, the Palmer Lecture Series, which was founded to honor the service and social activism of Reverend Robert Palmer. You can read a little bit more about it in your order of service if you're interested. And I also want to point out to you that if you would like to donate electronically from a mobile device, we now have 3 different options available. You can use our website, you can use an app on your phone, or you can use the text from your phone. There are a little bit more instructions about that printed in the weekly bulletin if you're interested. As always, your generosity and your presence here is received with gratitude.
Our reading today is from a book that was put out by our Unitarian Universalist Press, Skinner Press, called Justice on Earth, People of Faith, Working at the Intersections of Race, Class, and the Environment. It was the best workshop I went to at our General Assembly this year, and it's being the all-church read across Unitarian Universalist churches this year. We are going to be inviting people to have reading discussions about this later in the year. And so I'm reading from the introduction by Manish Mishra Mazzetti, who is a UU minister who just moved to Michigan. And he says, in the fall of 2013, I received an unusual invitation from the Unitarian Universalist Ministry for Earth. It was an invitation to attend something the organizers were billing as a collaborative laboratory, he explains, in Detroit the following March. I was a bit perplexed. While I have always cared about the environment, I would not have called myself an environmentalist. Within Unitarian Universalism, I've been a leader in our people of color community and a proponent of issues related to racial, cultural, and ethnic diversity. None of my work within the Unitarian Universalism to date had been related to environmentalism, and so I was left wondering why the UUMFE, all these initials, but that's the Ministry for Earth, was extending this invitation to me. As it was explained to me, they had recognized that it wanted to build bridges with activists from other communities and explore how we might all come together in ways that are collaborative and mutually supportive. Now I'm going to read his reflections after he took the workshop. What became increasingly clear over the course of our experience in Detroit is that the issues we were encountering were all profoundly linked. Lack of economic opportunity is tied to the quality of local schools and the health impacts of pollution. The inability to access clean water and healthy food directly impacts one's ability to function in school and at work. The intentional siting of power plants and waste facilities away from wealthier and wider communities impacts local housing prices, affects health, and points towards endemic structural racism. It is all linked. No single piece stands in isolation. Just as importantly, these insights are not only about Detroit, they are about how we understand and work toward justice wherever we are. The value of bringing an intersectional lens to justice-making work was profound realization to me, and it was exactly the point that the UUMFE was trying to make via the collaboratory and by inviting me, a self-proclaimed non-environmentalist, into their circle. I found myself so deeply affected by this need for intersectional justice-making. And as I read his closing words, I'd like to invite you to have them move you into a few moments of silence and your own reflection. He leaves each of us with a prayer for greater unity, collaboration, and mutual support in all the justice work we do. I hope and trust that you will reflect on how an intersectional approach toward justice-making might be unifying, impactful, and spiritually transformative. May it be so.
In Singing the Journey, we'll be singing number 1023, Building Bridges. You may rise if it feels comfortable for you, or you may stay seated if you'd like to sing as a meditation. I invite you to self-select round parts. We'll sing through it all together once, and then we'll sing as the Spirit moves us. Building Bridges, number 1023. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions, building bridges between our divisions, building bridges between with all of our voices and all of our visions, building bridges between our divisions, building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? Friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions, building bridges between our divisions. Make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions, building bridges between our divisions. I reach out to you, will you reach out to me? Friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Friends, we could make such sweet harmony.
Okay, I want us to think this morning. I'm trying to think. I want us to talk about politics, queer politics, but I don't want us to have narrow definitions. When I'm talking about politics today, I'm talking about all the ways that we work to build a polis, all the layers of governance and institutions that are building a society that we envision. Many of us envision a heaven on earth and sometimes feel like we live on a hell on earth and that we gotta love the hell out of the world. And people who feel like that are feeling a little frustrated lately, feeling a little tense. I've noticed a lot of anger, a lot of stress, and I thought we should be stepping back and looking at the big picture there. And I'm using the word queer, as I did last week, for us to step back and learn what we've learned from our queer friends and members here about what it means to look at who we are beyond the stereotyped identities. So when people say they're queer, they're saying, I don't want you to look at me as gay or lesbian or straight or trans. I want you to look at me as maybe some of those things, maybe all those things, maybe something that I can't put into words. Okay? So we use identifying words a lot for politics. Obviously, words like I'm a Democrat, I'm a socialist, I'm an independent, I'm a Republican, I'm in the Green Party. Or in a larger sense, maybe we use words like I'm a liberal, I'm a progressive, I'm a conservative, I'm an anarchist, I'm a libertarian. We use these words, and they're important. It's important, obviously, to have words to communicate. But they also rise up in us stereotypes that might not be the experience, our experiences, as we use these words. So that's why I'm inviting us to kind of enter this queer space. Identity politics has been one way for people who are trying to create a heaven on earth to organize for justice. When I was young, there was a civil rights movement, and so we focused on what it meant to be Black in this country, the historical injustices. And by focusing on that, we were able together to make some progress. At least it felt like progress at the time. Now that people here are working in prison ministries, they see how it's morphed into other injustices. Then the women who are working in that movement said, hey, wait a minute, you're still keeping us down. We want justice too. And so the feminist movement, the second wave of feminism, arose. And again, that targeted identity politics did make changes. It was useful. And as that happened, people who felt put down, who were gay, lesbian, trans, or bi, they felt put down in both of those movements. And they stood up and started organizing, focused on their rights. And again, it has borne fruit. Now, the Unitarian Universalist Association in the 1970s was organized by that. They had an Office of Black Affairs, an Office of Women's Affairs, and an Office of Gay and Lesbian Affairs. That's as far as they had gotten at that time. We just had gays and lesbians in identity politics. But it was interesting because where would you go? What office would you go to if you were Jennifer Nordstrom, one of the, she's a minister in Milwaukee. In those days, she was working as a community organizer on the reservations in the Southwest to help them keep nuclear power waste off their land. There was no Department of Indian Affairs or Environmental Affairs. So you can see how limiting identity politics was, even though it gave us some progress. At least it felt like it. So in the 80s, people started talking about the words that were in the reading that we've been talking a lot about here is intersectional politics, where they would understand that every one of us has different identities politically, as well as just the personal roles that we play. So when I was studying with Katie Cannon, who's a womanist, that means a Black feminist, ethicist, when I was in seminary, and that was in 89. That was the first year, 1989, that was the first year that people used the word intersectional feminism, for instance. And so I was a feminist. I would call myself a feminist. I was very active as a community organizer, changing laws that were to the benefit of women so that people would be convicted for violent crimes against women, mostly. And yet made clear that as much as I was oppressed as a woman, I had privileges because I was brought up in a middle-class, culturally white household. And so it was the intersections of all that made oppression, this relationship of oppression to being oppressed, very complicated. I mean, theoretically, I could be the bully and the bullied. Let's put it that way. But that's true of almost everybody in our society. The Unitarian Universalist Association has responded to that. They don't have identity politics in their in their departments. They use broader things like faith and action, outreach and social witness, or just social justice, so that we can continue to weave together our understanding of the intersectional nature of our society. Now, I think this is very confusing because, as Becky said, we are people who believe or affirm and promote the interconnected web of all existence, of which we are a part. And I'm not talking about that, although I am going to bring it back in. There is a web of relationships, not only between people, but between all sentient beings, the earth, between planets and stars. We are all part of what we envision as a web. What I'm talking about today with intersectionalism is a cultural construct. It is what we as people have made. Now, when I grew up, I heard this cultural construct described in different ways. A hierarchy that was based on a monarchy, that was based on the chain of being. When I was an active feminist, of course, I saw it as the patriarchy. But when you look at intersectionalism, the patriarchy implies that all men have more power than all women, which we know is not that simple. It's much more complex than that, okay? And it's not just men and women. Where are the room for all of the gender fluid people? You know what I mean? So it's patriarchy was not a word that people who are trying to understand in an intellectual way this structure, this cultural structure that has been built, I would say, for 10,000 years. Okay, so this has been a slow build. All right, so Elizabeth Schussler-Fiorenza, who happens to be a feminist biblical scholar, okay, she's also one of my professors. So she wrote in 2001 a book on feminist biblical scholarship, but she, in it, which, you don't need to read this book, but but she has this great introduction where she says, I want to find a word other than patriarchy to describe this so that we can really help us think in terms of the intersectional nature of oppression and being oppressed in this culture that we're talking about. And she, of course, being a biblical scholar, used Greek words, because they all do. So she used the words kyriarchy. Kyri means master, archy means dominance. So it's not, it's really the same thing. It's hierarchy, it's patriarchy, but it's kyriarchy opens it up so you don't assume who is the master, who has dominance, and it's a complex system. So I decided to try to show you the social system. I went to Lowe's and I bought a fence, okay? And so this is kyriarchy. And you can see it's a structure, right? I mean, there might be an interconnected web of all existence through that space that's relational and, between us and the earth and everything. But this is a structure. So you can almost imagine it like a trellis, like you put what's basic and real at the bottom, and it's going to grow on this, and it's shaped by this. So like our lives are shaped by this trellis, by this structure. And there's intersections. And what I'd like you to think is just if I could have rolled it all the way in. So the intersections go in and out, really 3D. It's like how the brain works, actually, with all the little dendrites. It's a very 3D thing. So if you have an imagination, like 3D imagination, imagine that. I couldn't quite get it to do that. But so we have this kyriarchy. We're just going to call it kyriarchy. Got to have a word today. So one of the major things that has created this kyriarchy, one of the major tools, is the tool of using words to separate people, and then institutionalizing them with laws and the way we build with cultures, habits, I don't know. So much of what I learned about oppression, I learned on my parents' knee. You know, this is just how it goes. This is who oppresses who. So it's daily routines. We learn this and build these things, okay? So separation, separating, putting words, like for when we had the first plantations in Virginia, we had very few, this is a classic hierarchical situation. Very few people were running very few plantations. They had white indentured servants. They were bringing over African slaves. They knew that there were a whole lot more of them, the workers, than there were the owners, the runners of these plantations. So they consciously separated them. All the black people were slaves. They couldn't get out of it. The white people were indentured servants. They could get out of it. And they made the laws to make sure that that stayed in place. Right? So what locked in, the kyriarchy is a structure that locks in these oppressive separations. Now, when we feel separated from people that we want to be connected to, how do we feel? Right? I mean, we feel often anxious, sad, and feelings are easily used to manipulate those separations. Fear, and you're not surprised by this, are you? Fear is the most common way to cause separation amongst human beings. So, in that example I have of the plantation, they made sure that the white people who had the promise of becoming promoted or managers were afraid of the black slaves and vice versa. And that fear is often expressed in how? Stress, anger, and of course, the desire to stay separated, to protect yourself from those feelings. And I think that's what's been aroused a lot lately in our culture. I see a lot of people who have the same goals to end oppression in a variety of ways, fighting with each other, arguing over little parts of their strategies, confused, and pushing each other away. And how many of us are feeling stressed now? Stress is fear, just low-level grade of fear all the time. Okay, so our faith, our Unitarian Universalist faith, reminds us. It reminds us that it is the spaces in between this, and that we have to focus in on what I think of as the both mental and emotional, the heart and the brain together, focuses us in on that heart. And in that heart, we have to hold both this wide open understanding. And the old Universalists used to say, we're all going to end up in heaven, so we might as well learn to get along on earth now. You know, I don't believe in heaven, but it says it succinctly, right? That it's about relationships. It's about opening up our heart to being connected And as Becky said, we have to practice that. We're brought up in a culture where, quite honestly, every single time I see one of these fights between good people trying to figure out how to build justice, I'm going, oh gosh, we got sucked in by the oppressive behavior again. We're being oppressive to each other. We are doing the separation game. We don't know how not to do that. That is a profound heart wound that causes us to do that. That we do not want to be that way. We know that below those separation parts of our heart, we want to reach out and be connected, don't we? But our mind's got to be a part of this too. That's why we're Unitarians, right? Because we're marrying the heart and the mind. And in community organizing terms, in the polis, we would call it, you got to do power analysis. You got to sit down with each other and think through what is going to change this system. Okay, so people are fighting about, oh, it's got to be grassroots. No, it's got to be an organization. You got to sit down and figure out, what intersections can I cut? I'm up here at the top. Wouldn't it be nice to cut stuff at the top? That's maybe more strategic, yeah? I don't know. I'd like to think it is. Got to be strategic. So we've got to think it through. Now, I have this experience a lot at NOAA. And I'm going to tell you a little more about that. But first, I just want to say quickly, all over the world, as people of faith and human nature, you know how they say, it's easier to believe in God than human nature. And you guys, a lot of you told me you were humanists last week, so you believe in human nature. So there's people all over the world cutting intersections all over the world. Now, the faith is someday all those different things that people are cutting are building and they're building real relationships in the meantime, that the infrastructure is going to fall, but there will be something else, which is real relationships. And we don't know what those real relationships are going to look like, do we? We don't know what structure we're going to replace, because these spaces, these queer spaces in between, as we build those relationships and learn together, we're co-creating a new way to be, a new social structure. There's potential there, but it's not like we can go in and say, I know what this is going to look like. Boy, and don't we like to do that? We think hope is knowing what it's going to look like. It's not. Everybody I know, whether they think hope is knowing I'm going to be cured to change a social structure, is disappointed and loses hope, because it doesn't work like that. Hope is in the process being open to the potential of what arises out of these relationships as we work together to change. Okay. So at the NOAA meeting on Tuesday night, we have at NOAA, Nashville Organized for Action Hope. It's 61 organizations who are committed to working together for justice in Davidson County. It's very narrow in that way, but it's a very diverse group of people. It's people from both historically Black, historically white faith communities. There's Christians, UUs, Jews, and Muslims. There are people from unions. There's 6 unions. There's a few community groups. So it's the most diverse space. And I love it because I feel like I'm building relationships outside of the separations that are built into this culture. We live in a very segregated culture, and I get to build relationships with people who I don't get to build relationships with day to day. Okay. So over the last 4 years is a criminal justice group that has been working together people in North Nashville and people in Green Hills, for example, who live in very different cultural spaces. Black cultural space and a white cultural space, and how the policing and the courts affect them. Now, you know, 2 weeks ago, a second young man running from a traffic stop, young black man, was killed by a white officer. Even the police officers understand that it's systemic in that the policies they have about stopping people at traffic stops are dangerous. Okay? People have been working with the police, with the city, for years on this. There's people in North Nashville who have been working on having a community oversight board because the police have no oversight except in-house for 27, now it must be 28 years now. Okay. So, the criminal justice group and stood before the board on Tuesday night of NOAA, where there's, let's see, there's how many board members? 3 times 61, whatever that is. That's how many board members there is, probably about half that number there that night, saying, we have to be strong on this. And there was people standing up, pro and con. Of course, people who live in neighborhoods that happen to be, the whiter and richer those neighborhoods were, they didn't see that this was a crisis. They saw it as, let's study more, let's understand this more, let's take our time, let's go back. And to a person, every person in the African American communities stood up and said, this is a crisis. This is danger now. This has to be dealt with now. One of the black leaders, our vice president, Benny, he stands up and he goes, this is like the Cuban Missile Crisis. And of course, a lot of people under, 40 and under didn't even know what he was talking about. But I remember being afraid during the Cuban Missile Crisis, so I understood what he was talking about. I had no idea how the vote was going to go, but people really listened to each other, diverse points of view, and in the end, now, our team, we've got Kyle Mothershead, he hates me to point him out, but he's the co-chair of that criminal task force. So in our core team, we had 5 of us there, our 3 delegates and 2 others. People are very active. We had followed this for years now. We understood that to stand up and say, we want the mayor to fire the police chief, was built on years of distrust of his leadership. And to say we want to encourage people to endorse and vote for a community oversight board, the same. Years and years. And we had built trust with one another, and it was easy for us to vote yes. For other people, that hadn't followed it as much, maybe they struggled more. But 23 of the churches voted, 26 voted yes, 4 voted no, and 2 abstained. So it was passed. It was democracy. It was the way for us to listen to one another, cross the attempts at division, and come together to support something. So Tuesday night, 4 o'clock, if anybody can get out of work and get into Public Square, I know the traffic's awful, and there's going to be a big press conference, but mostly, quite honestly, it'd be nice to have bodies there in solidarity with people from the neighborhoods that feel in danger. I mean, quite honestly, if you're white and look middle class, show up. We need to show that it is not just, and by just I mean the 20% of people in these neighborhoods that suffer for this. It affects all of us. So if you can come, great. I just want to close by saying I do have hope. I do feel like we can learn to be more spacious, to build relationships and eventually create things that we can't even imagine as we slowly dismantle this. And I just want to say, it took 10,000, I say 10,000 years because I say since the Neolithic, right? Since it took 10,000 years to build this structure, It might take 10,000 years to dismantle it and rebuild a new one. So let's just find some joy and hope in the work and the relationships as we go along the way. I do believe we can build a heaven on earth. May it be so.
So let's sing about it. In singing the journey, number 1018, come and go with me. Will you come and go with me to that land? Please rise in body or spirit as you're so moved and join in singing number 1018. If you'd like to grab a shaker, come on down. Come and go with me. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land. There'll be freedom in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land where I'm bound. They'll be singing. They'll be singing in that land. They'll be singing. They'll be singing in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. They'll be singing in that land. They'll be singing in that land. They'll be singing in that land where I'm bound.
The words to the chalice extinguishing can be found at the bottom of your order of service. Please join me. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
I'd like to close with these words by the great womanist, thinker, and poet Audre Lorde. And I dream of our coming together, encircled, driven, not only by love, but by lust for a working tomorrow. The flights of this journey, mapless, uncertain, and necessary as water. This service is over. Let our service begin again, renewed.